Ladies and gentlemen, the next Vice President of the United States of America, Joe Lieberman.
Gore needed to do something dramatic, something different. Lieberman checked all those boxes.
You want to know something? It's Election Day!
You believe you're President of the United States and Vice President of the United States. And then...
This recount is mandated by Florida law.
So we have a few questions to ask for our special guest, the executive producer of the film, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. I have a compound question, so it's objectionable if it was in court, but we're here. All right. Could you tell us why you decided to make this film, given all the possible films that you could have made? Why did you choose this film? And what lessons do you hope that the audience will extract from that and apply in 2025 and beyond?
I'll try to make this brief. We decided to make this film because of what was happening in the country, and we felt that it would be educational and really show people that there is another way to approach politics and interact with each other, particularly with respect to political discourse. And what I hope people will take away from the film is just that bipartisanship is not a bad thing, that I had mentioned before that politics and developing public policy is the art of the possible, and that particularly here in Philadelphia, in terms of what happened just down the street, I hope I'm pointing to the right way, where these brilliant young men, and they were young, created this incredible experiment in liberty and democracy. And then years later, created the Constitution. Incredible lessons. And the other thing that I hope people walk away with, particularly people of faith who see this movie, whether they're Jewish or Christian, that you can't be a person who is devout, and for Jews who believe in Hashem and who are willing to observe commandments, whether it's one commandment or 613, that you can be very successful in this modern world. And I think that's an important lesson.
Thank you. Ron?
Yep. Rob, thanks so much for the film. Very interesting. One sense I had about the film is it projects Lieberman almost as a heroic figure, in the sense that his actions appear to be congruent with core beliefs, as opposed to just opportunistic. And I'm wondering if that was kind of consciously what you were going for in putting the film together.
Well, when we talked with him about making the film, no different than our first film, we explained that it was not going to be a love kiss. And I think the film reflects some of the things that some could portray as mistakes, but definitely he had a lot of people who really were angry with him and couldn't stand him. But I'm biased. I worked for him. I was his friend. I viewed him and still view him as a heroic figure, both as a Jew and as an American, and how he functioned as an elected official. And I think for particularly young people, and as I mentioned earlier, we're creating a curriculum that will go along with an abbreviated version of the film, and we plan on bringing it to secondary schools throughout the United States. I want young people, and civics is not really being taught in our school systems now, and that is a shame. I want young people in particular to learn that, as John Kennedy said, politics and government can be a noble cause. And Lieberman showed that. And so I think that's an important message and why we did it.
Throughout my career, I have been persistently, stubbornly
bipartisan.
It was about how do we address the issue and help the American people.
He is not a cookie-cutter Democrat.
He was strong in defense.
The civilized world has often had to meet force with force.
But more liberal on social issues.
I welcome the president's support of a new Clean Air Act.
He was ahead of the curve on the environment, on gun control.
Can you share with us some personal anecdotes that you had with the senator, especially the ones that seem to be the most challenging and painful?
Well, I'll share two that are, one is funny. He would invite me periodically to the Senate to shadow him, and he'd give me a staff badge. Anyways, we had coffee in the Senate dining room to start the day off, and he said very expansively, "Rob, America's a wonderful country." And I looked at him, I said, "Senator, I agree, but what prompted you to say this?" And in a very exaggerated, whisper, he leaned forward and said, "John Glenn is my Shabbos goy." and I howled. Glenn's office was next to him. And if he had a vote in the Senate on Shabbos, and in the Senate, there isn't an electric button like in the House. You either do this or this, yes or no. He would walk from Georgetown on Shabbos, and Glenn would unlock his door and put the lights on for him. The second anecdote is a little bit more serious. It was the Friday night before the election for Senate. And, weekends in politics is a big retail business, the football games in the fall and everything else. And I'm walking on one of those New Haven, cold, kind of dark Friday nights to Schull, in the Westville part of New Haven, where Abe lived with his wonderful family. And I just felt somebody was behind me, and I turned, and about 75 yards down on what's called Fountain Street, I see this solitary figure with his collar up and his overcoat. And I noticed the walk, and I said, "I think that's Lieberman." And sure enough, he came up to me, wished each other good Shabbos, gave each other a hug and kiss. And as we're walking, I turned to him and I said, what are you thinking about the campaign?" And he stopped and he said, "Rob, it's Shabbos. Let's enjoy the Shabbat." I walked with an incredible sense of pride. I can't even, to this day, I had such pride in him as a Jew and as someone who was so proud of his Yiddishkeit.
Was there anything left out of the final cut that you wish could have been in if you had another 10 minutes of showtime? There's so many juicy things, the Palin choice, among others, that everybody laughed at.
My wife and I have seen the movie a number of times, and I gauge the laugh factor. This was an audience that laughed the most on the lines, and I have to say I enjoyed it. But I have to say the biggest laugh is when, I think it's Charlie Black, the strategist, says, "And we took another risk," and then Palin walks out. That's a howl. I have to say, everybody gets a big kick out of that one. Mm-hmm. But nothing really juicy. Joe, when I worked for Joe when he was young, I thought he was old. I thought he was like a little old Jewish guy. And he was a very conservative, righteous, very smart fella. And I want to just share this with the group. When I did spend time with him with other senators, I realized first how smart he was, and secondly, a little depressing about the group of senators, and not a lot of sharp blades in the time I was there. I walked away like shaking my head sometimes.
He was very diplomatic about Bush II and the post-Iraq, post-war American occupation of Iraq. Was there more that he spoke of that didn't make the cut?
Not really. First, the audience should know he was very close with George Bush, and what's interesting, it was George Bush and Dick Cheney who defeated him. They became very close personal friends. Huh. And but he, You know, he felt strongly about Middle East, about the United States interests, and particularly Israel. And he saw the threats. And he felt, what you heard is, that was the first time he ever publicly acknowledged that he would have voted differently. It got a lot of coverage in Connecticut.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And Rob, can you tell us why it was that you chose to work for Senator Lieberman? And what are some of the toughest challenges that the two of you worked on?
Well, I was a city administrator in West Haven, Connecticut, the next town over. He represented as a state senator. I will tell it just to back up a step. When he first ran for state senate, my dad had a luncheonette called Schwartz's on a street called Legion Avenue. It was a 4-block area in New Haven with all the kosher bakeries, butchers, shops. It was like Lower East Side, but New Haven's version. My father also carried all the Jewish newspapers in Hebrew, so it was a big attraction. Abe Rich's dad had a old-fashioned laundromat just 2 blocks down the street. And Abe and I were reminiscing how we would walk from the yeshiva to my father's luncheonette, have chocolate sodas, play pinball, and then down to his dad, who closed up and would drive me home and take Abe home. One day, Joe Lieberman came in and presented himself as a candidate for state senate. My father fell in love with him. Put his placards in the window, walked them up and down, and our family, that's how we started with Joe Lieberman. So I meet him as a city administrator. I became a ghostwriter for his speeches, one of his guys. We became very close, and then when the chief of staff opened up, hired me and also politically to build his statewide organization. And he asked me to meet with all kinds of Democrats when I went to work for him. And he said, I have a problem with the left-wing part of the Democratic Party, even though he was liberal and left. And when I met with them, it was very apparent that there was an issue they had with him. And it was almost personal. And that never went away.
Trying to bring diverse people together to get results.
Are we ready to fight?
That's the view that Joe Lieberman embodies.
Every time a barrier is broken, the doors of opportunity go wider for every single one of us.
So thank you, Rob. So Ron and I have very much enjoyed this part of it. Thank you also for the great film, and it brings back, for me, and I'm sure many of the people here, many memories from days gone by about Senator Lieberman. So thank you very much. And now we're going to bring you to the part that Rob likes the best, and that is the totally unscripted Q&A from the audience. So feel free to ask whatever questions you would like, and Rob really likes it, the tougher the better.
We have people with microphones, so wait for the mic and be crisp in your questions.
I thoroughly enjoyed this movie and your last, and I was wondering what parallels you saw between Joe Lieberman and Menachem Begin.
Menachem Begin?
Yeah. If any.
Begin. Very honorable, number one. Number two, there are many politicians who use their political office to leverage personal gain. Joe, when I worked for him, and he was a lawyer too, turned away cases even if there was a perception of conflict. Those are two things. And then finally, courage of making the tough calls, the tough decisions.
Thank you. Other questions?
First of all, I can see Russia from my window. Thank you. I love the movie. Totally love that movie. I just have one question. I was curious. You mentioned who's the other one from the Iraq War?
Oh, I see it there.
Bin Laden. But you never mentioned, I know, you did not mention Osama bin Laden for the 9/11. I was wondering why he was left out of the...
I'm having trouble understanding the question.
I think the question is what?
Right. There was just so much we could include. There was another 6 hours of interviews with him that never made into the film. That's really the short, honest answer. Yep.
Thank you. Other questions? Don't all raise your hand at once.
Thank you. Can we go back to the McCain-Palin ticket? For those of us who have seen this situation, in the movie, it seemed very, very glib. Oh, Joe was pro-choice, therefore he couldn't be a vice presidential candidate. That seems to be, personally, very superficial, very one-liner. Was there any other things happening below the surface regarding Palin versus Lieberman as the vice presidential candidate?
Really not. There was a major push among conservative Republicans. Charlie Black was very much a leader and a strategist, but a leader of that element who thought it was sacrilegious to even think about having Lieberman be on the ticket. And one of the big issues was the pro-choice issue. It wasn't any attempt to be glib about it. It was as basic as that. And McCain, he was McCain's first choice. There are 2 documentaries that have been made on McCain in which McCain says that. And one other little anecdote. Our beautiful daughter, Rebecca, was a summer intern for Lieberman. And when you started your internship, you fill out a form, and the last question is, what one experience do you want to have by the time your internship is over? Hers was, meet John McCain. So the second to the last day, she calls me all bummed out. I'm not going to meet McCain. I said, Rebecca, he's a busy guy. So the next day, she calls me delirious. Her cubicle, she had her back to the door, and she's working, and there's a tap on her shoulder, and she turns around, and here I am, Rebecca. John McCain with Joe behind him laughing his keister off. And she has a great picture with the 3 of them and just treasures it. I want to thank you all.